It's great to be here. I really appreciate the focus that you guys have around making a global impact. The gospel is not to stay local, right? In fact, you guys are going to be praying tonight about that, as Tate was saying. You're taking seriously Christ's call to make disciples of all nations. That's really at the heartbeat of who you guys are. In fact, you guys did this in your mission statements, right? To empower influencers in the world for Jesus Christ. And I could tell you about how Our Daily Bread Ministries is doing that around the world. Tate shared a little bit about us, and I could talk about the work that we're doing in prisons, places that we're doing a pastoral training, literacy in Africa. I could talk about doing solar lights where I've been out into remote regions in Indonesia. There's incredible things that we're seeing. We're seeing the Bible move in Europe in ways that's not done before. We're seeing early and quiet revivals happening. We're seeing outspoken revivals happening in places like the Middle East that you would not expect to see it. And you can learn more about all of that. You can see Luke Jones, who's going to be in the hall where the missions fair is. You can see some of the resources. You could talk to Luke. He knows the ministry well. He's also a really cool guy, lived in Australia, so you could ask him about that. But I'm not going to talk about any of that. What I'd like to talk to you about is God's call and your moment right now. And I'd like to do that by telling you two stories. Actually, one story and two questions. So, first story. We bought a house a little over a year ago, and we're remodeling the house. It needed a lot of work. I wanted some kind of project that would take my mind off of my job. It'd give me a place to go to. It's 2 acres. It's like this perfect place. I'm gonna be able to raise chickens. I'm really excited about it. I'll be able to tell you all about that if you're interested in chickens. But it needs a lot of work, and I'm not a handyman. My wife is. She's a handy woman. She works the tools. I just am her lackey, and literally, she's got the big tools. She's cutting the lumber. She's good, and so she knows the house really well. So a couple of weeks ago, in fact, I was thinking about this topic here. She was in our basement in the morning, making things things were going well. We have this furnace, and it's an older furnace. And before they had separated systems so that you could have kind of dual heating, we have it kind of manual. And there's this big metal plates that you put in. You can move, and you can actually move the air throughout the house. It's actually really efficient. It's actually better than any electrical system. So she was going down. There was a cold day. She was going down to check on everything. And she noticed in the basement, the lights are out. So, because she has a phone like all of us, she got out her phone, turned the flashlight, and she's kind of looking and trying to see, and she makes her way towards the electrical panel. She opens it and realizes that the breaker's off. So she flips it. Nothing. A little concerning, right? Because the rest of the house seems to be good. At this point, I would be called an electrician, because I'm like clueless at this point. But she's like, no, she's trying. So she starts looking around. And as she looks around, she looks and sees. Okay, 2 questions. So one question for those of you guys who are here. This is a liberal arts school, right? A Christian liberal arts school. So we got some history majors in the room. 1941. What happens? Pearl Harbor, right? So December 7th, a day that will live in infamy, right? Major attack on the United States. And talking about changing the culture, changing the moment. We were in a Great Depression. We're trying to come out of it. And actually, World War II was actually the impetus that kind of spurred us out of that, but shocked everybody. Changed the life of everybody in this country. And actually, it was an event that just, it was cataclysmic for the entire world. 1939. What's history majors? What's the major date? What's the major event in 1939? September 1st, 1939. Anybody know? Germany invades Poland, and World War II starts. 2 years earlier than that, right? 2 years later is 1941. And this is what actually creates this great cataclysmic event for the world that we're actually still living the aftermath of that. In fact, what's happening right now in the world is actually kind of revolt against the new world order that emerged from that. But it's fascinating to think about the people who lived in that moment. Worldwide depression, great economic uncertainty, and Germany is rolling its tanks into Poland, and the world will never be the same. I like to come back to that story and those two questions, those two dates. But before I do that, we need to turn to the book of Hosea. Now, that's a strange passage, a strange book, if we're talking about Global Impact Week. So Hosea chapter 1, verses 1 through 2. The word of the Lord that came to Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, when the Lord first spoke through Hosea. The Lord said to Hosea, "Go, take to yourself a wife of whoredom, and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord." And I've just now said whoredom 3 times, and we're probably all a little bit uncomfortable because we don't use that word very often today, right? In fact, we can recognize the severity of it because we understand what actually happens with sex trafficking and people getting caught up in that. And actually using that language to describe people that are caught up in that is really difficult. But it does capture the idea of unfaithfulness that God was wanting to address and using Hosea to address. And I raise all this because when you think about those 2 verses and you think about what's most memorable and what's least memorable, what is most memorable is the word whoredom. In fact, most people, I guess even though a lot of you guys study, there's Bible majors in here and you guys are all required to take Bible theology classes, the minor prophets aren't things that people major on. And if we know anything about the minor prophets, we know that there's Jonah, and we know that story because if we grew up in a church, we heard that over and over again. And we probably know the story of Hosea and chapters 1 and 2 because he was asked to marry a prostitute as an illustration of Israel's infidelity to the Lord. And then the rest of the minor prophets was like, okay, there's a couple of key verses and let's get on to the Gospels. That story, what God asks Hosea to do, like, it's memorable. Can you imagine that marriage? Can you imagine that engagement? Hosea coming to Gomer and saying, "Hey, got a proposition for you. God told me to marry you. And the reason why I'm supposed to marry you is because you're a prostitute." Like, that probably went over. Like, can you imagine filming that one? Capturing that moment for the memory book? And can you imagine what that marriage must have been like? Like, I don't think that was probably a really great marriage. In fact, we know it wasn't because Gomer left after a while. Can you imagine when they had a fight? You could just see Hosea frustrated with Gomer. They're arguing over something in the kitchen, and Hosea's like, "Well, God told me to marry you." And Gomer is looking at him saying, "Yeah, you don't love me. The only reason why we're married is because God told you to marry me." Like, you can imagine that there's probably a lot of tension. And it's an interesting thing to just consider and reflect on. But we're not going to do that. The second most memorable thing in that passage, I believe, is the word go. It's the command. It's the first word that God says to Hosea, go. Now, this echoes the book of Jonah, because in the book of Jonah, the first word that God says to Jonah is go. Go to the Ninevites. And the difference between Hosea and Jonah is that Jonah doesn't go at first, and Hosea does. But it's not just Hosea and Jonah who go. Elijah, the great story about him when he confronts the prophets of Baal and he runs away from Ahab and he's hiding in the cave and throwing a pity party for himself, and God kind of picks him up, dusts him off. The first thing that God says to him at that moment is, go. Go anoint the kings and go find your successor. And if God isn't telling them to go do something, God is always telling the prophets to go and say something. In fact, if you look at the prophets, this idea of go is absolutely critical. But that's, while memorable, there's something else I'd like to talk about, and that's the list of kings. Now, this is probably the least memorable thing. They're really four, and we get these four kings, and they're the kings of Judah, and we get the king of Israel, and it's Jeroboam. The four kings of Judah, if you know anything about them, they're kind of middling to okay. Not the greatest kings. Some of them are good, but they're kind of flawed, and some of them are just downright wicked. But Hosea is not sent to the southern kingdom. He's sent to the northern kingdom, where there's only one king mentioned, Jeroboam. So, most memorable, Hosea, marry a prostitute. Least memorable, the list of kings. Now, I'd like to look at that same list from a different perspective, not from what's most memorable, but from what I believe today is the most important. And what's the least important is actually what God tells Hosea to do. We like to get caught up in that story, but I think for today's purposes, I'm going to set that entire thing aside. As important it is for the book of Hosea, because it actually illustrates Israel's infidelity, I think for our conversation for global impact work, that's the least important. Actually, the word go, you would think, oh, well, that must be the most important. And I'll say, yes, it's important. I mean, definitely we're getting caught up in the mission of God. In fact, Jesus, in his last words on this earth, says what? Go. But I think that's not the most important for us today. I think the most important thing for us today is the list of the kings. And specifically Jeroboam. Jeroboam II, the 8th century BC. On the surface, Jeroboam's reign looked successful. In the northern kingdom, Jeroboam's reign was the most successful. They were winning militarily, left and right. Economic success all over the place. The money was rolling in. The national confidence they had was never higher. Jeroboam looked like a great king, if you measure him on those metrics. But during his reign, idolatry was institutionalized. Worship was distorted to serve convenience and power. The wealthy prospered while the poor were crushed. Sexual morality and religious hypocrisy flourished side by side, and it was a moment of external success and internal decay. And at this moment is that Hosea lives, and it's this moment that God calls Hosea to confront. And so just put yourselves in Hosea's shoes for a second. He had to be wondering, like, why me? Why now? Like, why was I born now? Would it be great to be the prophet to David? Like, yes, I could go confront him about Bathsheba, but like, that was a better moment because, like, David was a man after God's own heart. Like, if I had to be a prophet, during the reign of Solomon, yeah, there was a lot of syncretism going on, but it wouldn't be you're sending me to this guy? And I could just imagine him saying things like, yeah, why am I sent here? Why be faithful when everyone else is compromising? I would have loved to have been born at a different time. Notice what God doesn't say or doesn't do. God doesn't remove Hosea from the moment. God does not wait for conditions to improve. God's first word to Hosea is simple and unsettling. Go. He doesn't give him any qualifications. He doesn't give him any encouragement. He doesn't say, you got this. He just says, go. Go into the brokenness. Go into the messiness. Go live faithfully where God has placed you. Go and do hard things. Probably the greatest idol in America today is the idolatry of comfort. We like things that are convenient. I'll speak for myself. I like things that are convenient. I like things that make my life easy. I like things that insulate me from the hardness of the world. I love comfort. And God is not interested in comfort. He's not interested in Hosea's comfort. And he's not interested in my comfort. And he's not interested in your comfort. What he's interested in is go. Now, as I'm thinking about this, thinking about the two questions I began with, because in 1941, the other thing that happened in 1941 was that this college was founded. Some men and women got together, started the Baptist Bible Institute, and started in the fall. And a couple months later, World War II began. Like, that is like the worst time in the middle of a depression. Let's start a Bible college. Like, that's not a good idea. Not easy, not comfortable. In 1939 was the year after that Our Daily Bread Ministries was founded. It was September 1938 that the first radio broadcast, the radio Bible class, was done, which later became Our Daily Bread Ministries. In the middle of the Depression, when war was on the horizon, men and women responded to God saying, go. And Kate didn't realize I was going to say this, but yeah, 80 years later, think about that. 4 generations have come and gone. And both these organizations are still being faithful to the call that God's given them. They responded when they might not wanted to go, when it wasn't comfortable. Now, I resonate with this story because in 2008, most of you or a lot of you were either not born yet or were too young to remember that. But in 2008, I became the provost at Cornerstone University. It was June of 2008, and I was excited. I had all these ideas. I had this vision of what I wanted to do. I could see the future. It's like, hey, this is my opportunity. I was energized. I was confident. I was optimistic. And then 4 months later, the bottom fell out. And the greatest financial crisis this world's experienced since the Great Depression was the financial crisis of 2008. And what I was confronted with as a new executive was tightening cash flows, the loss of bridge loans, like all the rules. If it actually, the 2008 crisis affected higher education more than any other industry. Enrollment became difficult. All the rules got thrown out the window. And I remember about 4 months in, or 8 months into my role, 4 months after the crisis, going, God, why me? Why now? I would have loved to have been provost in 2002 or in 1992 or 1982, because then you just threw out your shingle and things just happened. You're asking me to be the provost at this moment when it's really hard and the whole thing's going to pot, and we're asking ourselves, will it be in existence next year? So I get this, like at a deep level, I get this. And I guess some of you might get this as well. Some of you might be sitting here today going, man, life's tough. We live in a political world, geopolitical world, where all the rules are getting changed. War's on the horizon. The world is in more chaos today than it's ever been since World War II. The financial constraints that are affecting this world, while we right now in the United States are insulated, I will tell you, my offices around the world are getting pummeled by what's happening in Iran. It's changing all the rules for them. There's more anxiety in this moment today than there's ever been in my lifetime. And I lived when we thought that the bomb from the Soviet Union was going to land on us. We are living in an age of anxiety. This is your moment. It's tough. My daughters who are about to graduate, and some of you are about to do this, are asking, like, what does my career look like in the age of AI? And I know this is a conversation you guys are having because I've talked to all my daughter's friends, and they're all asking the same question. It's an existential question. Like, will there be something for me? How do I live in this? Like, this moment kind of sucks. Like, I would have liked to have been born like when Dad was born, because then I'd at least be able, and that's not the choice that they're given. It's not the choice that you're given. And on top of all that, you just got the other challenges of just being a student, right? There's probably some of you guys have a test the next hour, although probably not because you were probably not here. You're probably studying if you have a test the next hour. Um, but the challenges of academia, the pressures of relationships, the pressures of financial questions about what it looks like to pay off your student loans. Like, I get all that. I've been in higher education. I've listened to the stories. Yes, asking a lot of questions. Why me? Why now? And it's an important question. Let me suggest to you that you are prepared for this moment more than you realize. See, Cornerstone is preparing you really well. Cornerstone is grounding you in scripture. It's shaping you to think from a Christian perspective with a liberal arts education. It's whetting your discipline and a biblical worldview. It's forcing you to wrestle with your vocation. And I know this because I graduated from an institution just like yours here. And everything that I'm doing today is rooted in what I experienced in those 4 years. There is not a day that goes by that I don't look back to my 4 years at Corban University and see how it transformed me to be ready for this moment at this time. But beyond that, there's something else that I'd like to give you besides all that preparation that you have. And that is to wrap up what I think is the most important for you is yes, you're all prepared, but you could still ask yourself, is this the right moment? And so I'd encourage you to have an attitude of gratitude about the moment you're given. Like, not just put up with it, not just accept it, but to actually be grateful that God has placed you at this moment right now. It's an active trust in the sovereign God. It's saying, I am thankful for this moment, not because it is easy, but because God has placed me here. He's not by surprise by it. I am thankful for God's presence because he is not withdrawn from the world or from me. And lastly, I'm thankful even for what hasn't happened, that God is already protecting me and doing things for me. And that takes me back to the story because when my wife turned around and looked, what she saw was an electrical cord that was burnt with the metal piece from the furnace had fallen out. And the best case scenario could have been her getting shocked and harmed. The worst case scenario she's looking at is like, this could have burned down the entire house. And when I came home that day and she showed it to me, and so I actually keep this as a reminder of how God protects when I don't even know it, as I'm sleeping upstairs on the third floor and don't realize that what could have happened is we could have lost everything. And God, because he was gracious, right? So I'd like to close with these thoughts for you. Hosea didn't live in an ideal season, and neither do we. But faithfulness has never been dependent on the ideal season. It's been dependent on a faithful God. So my prayer has been for you, and as I was praying before we started, is that at this moment right now is what's being birthed here at Cornerstone University is a new movement, a new wave, new organizations that will be 80 years from now, people will say, that happened here. And some of you guys saying, well, it's not possible. And just like the men and women in 1938 and in 1941 didn't think it was possible either because the circumstances said no. And they said, yes, we'll go. And what has been birthed and what has been blessed, both these organizations have been blessings to people far beyond those people could have ever thought possible. God is sending you right now. And he's sending you tomorrow and next week and next year. He is sending you, and he's saying, go, 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 go. not because the situation's easy and not because it's comfortable. Go, because if you don't, I'm going to have to send somebody else because I'm going to send my people to go do the work that's difficult. So my prayer is that you'll step into that calling. So I'll pray quickly and then we'll dismiss. So, Father, I just thank you for this moment. Thank you for this opportunity as we just reflect on your word to Hosea to go during moments that are difficult and uncomfortable and ugly and messy. Father, may we see your faithfulness and not the circumstances, not the challenge. You reign despite all the difficulty and all the ugliness. We ask this in your name. Amen.